the female reproductive system. All right, so we're going to be going through the female reproductive anatomy with this particular model and one other model. My name is Dr. H, and I will be going through my lab objectives, and hopefully it works for your lab objectives as well, whoever you may be. The female reproductive system. I think the easiest way to start with any of the reproductive system, and really any of the anatomy systems, is to try to find the major organs and then the accessory organs. Well, the major organ of the female reproductive system, there's only one, and that's where gametes are formed, the gonad of the female reproductive system, which is the ovary, and that's this structure back there. Okay, it's attached to the uterus by the ovarian ligament. That's kind of the only thing that really kind of holds it in place. Okay, so that's the ovary right there. Hanging over the top of it is a big tube system. So during an ovulation, when the ovary kind of ejects its little oocyte out into the open space, this peritoneal cavity here, what's going to happen is these funny little fingers, I'm not sure how well you can see that there are a bunch of fingers on this model. I don't have good light today. So there's a bunch of little fingers there. Those are called fimbria, or fimbriae is plural. And they are all a part of this tube system, which is called the fallopian tube or the oviduct. There's a bunch of different names for it. So the fimbria are those fingers there. There's some decent light there. The fimbria. Now, deep inside of all this, you'd find the infundibulum, which is really kind of the neck of this whole fimbria thing. And I like to actually think of it like a hand, right? Where the fingers are the fimbria. If you had a tube in the middle of your palm, that would be a portion of the infundibulum. And what's going to happen is during ovulation, the fimbria start to move over the surface of that ovary. And it creates a current that's going to suck that oocyte up into the oviduct itself, up into that fallopian tube, where that oocyte is going to go to this enlarged portion of the fallopian tube, and this is called the ampulla of the fallopian tube. And that's where it's going to embed itself into the wall and wait for fertilization. Once fertilized, or even if it's not, right, at the end of a cycle, that oocyte is going to pass down through the rest of the fallopian tube, the body, down to a narrowing space. You can't see it very well on this model, but it narrows down here, and that's called the isthmus, if your professor needs you to know that, of the fallopian tube. But ultimately, that fallopian tube goes into this large structure here, and that's the uterus. In case you didn't know, the uterus sits on top of the bladder in the female system, and that's why when a baby's growing inside the uterus, a pregnant woman has to pee so much, because you got a baby sitting on your urine maker. It doesn't literally make the urine, you get my point. We'll learn a little bit more about the uterus in just a second. So the uterus, right, there's going to be a whole bunch of different parts of the uterus, a fundus, which is the enlarged region of the uterus, a body, and a neck, which is known as the cervix. You'll see it better when I pull this plaque off. Down inferior to all that is the vaginal canal. And then external to all of that, the external female genitalia are collectively known as the vulva. We'll see what all of those structures are. So let's take this portion of the model off. Now you can see a little bit better. Now we're going to zoom in on the uterus first. So the uterus has three major layers, and you probably started to recognize these layers as you've gone through the anatomy of other systems. There's an outside, a middle, which is made up of muscle, and an inside. Epi, myo, endo. And when you're dealing with the uterus, we say metrium. Eum tells you connective tissue, or membrane, typically, or layer. So this is going to be the epimesium, this is going to be the endomesium, And then the middle layer, the muscle, is myomesium. Muscle, myo. So, epimesium, myomesium, and then the very inside layer. Not the space, not the gap. I've kind of been pointing at that, and that's not my intention. Just the very inside layer where the epithelial tissue is found would be the endometrium. The fundus, which is the large region, the body, and then down here is the neck of the cervix. Sorry, the neck of the uterus, and neck in Latin is cervix. So down here is where you find that cervix. The cervix has a canal that runs down the middle of it. That's the cervical canal. And there is going to be an opening on either side of the cervical canal, an external os and an internal os. Those are the openings that go through the cervical canal. I hope I'm pointing to the right things. I can't really see very well, but I believe I am. That's the cervix. Of course, this is where a fetus is going to develop, and it's going to have to pass down through the cervix to be able to be born. Right down here is a kind of a space, and this is actually circular. The neck of the cervix kind of projects down into the vaginal canal, and where you end up seeing these horns, well, really you got to think of this as like an entire dome that's going to wrap around the cervix. So it's an entire a space that wraps all the way around. That's called the fornix, and there's a posterior fornix and an anterior fornix, and then lateral fornices on either side. Those are the fornix. Down below that is the vaginal canal, covered in elastic folds called ruga. Rugae, plural. Ruga, singular. Add an E to the end and we make it plural. So all of those folds you see there are ruga. Rugae. Which is going to go down and it's going to meet the external vaginal orifice, which is down here. Okay? The vulva is made up of labia, vestibules. There's a bunch of different structures of the vulva that you guys need to know about. So looking at the plaque from this angle, this large lip, which is what labia means in Latin, is called the labia majora. Labia majora. Okay, it's the major lip, the major labia. Deep to that is going to be the labia minora. And down inside of that would be the vaginal canal. The labia minora actually extends up into this little piece of erectile tissue right here. Okay, this is erectile tissue. It can actually fill or engorge with blood during intercourse, and this is called the clitoris. Okay, there's both a head or glands of the clitoris, and then there's the main portion of the body of the clitoris as well there. What else do you guys need to know about with this model? The front portion up here, where you see a little bit more adipose tissue, and where hair would grow from up here, is called the mons pubis. M-O-N, mons pubis. Now I want to see you guys to see this again from this angle. So now you can see on this model, we got the labia majora, the labia minora, and over on this side, we're going to actually have portions of the labia minora that you can see underneath. And then up here would be where the labia majora is, but the tissue has been cut away. So what you end up seeing underneath is actually a large erectile tissue. It's a portion of the vestibular bulb. Okay, this vestibular bulb is erectile tissue that's going to gorge with blood again during intercourse, and it's going to allow for the canal to be squeezed down below it. Right here at the front is another good depiction of the clitoris. And you can see the glands of the clitoris at the tip as well. Back in the back is where we're going to have the vestibular gland. And the vestibular gland is going to secrete mucus into the vaginal canal during intercourse. believe that's all the structures you guys need to know on the female reproductive system in my class. And we can see those structures in this model here as well. Okay, this is going to be the female reproductive system here. This front would be in a depiction of the mons pubis. This is where we'd end up seeing portions of the vulva. Okay, you have your major lips and your minor lips. I might not have had that angled right, apologize. You have your major lips and your minor lips, so labia majora, labia minora. And we're going to go ahead and look at this from the side, and you can see portions of these things you weren't able to see with the previous model very well. Okay, there's the vestibular bulb and the vestibular gland. Can't see it on that side though because it's covered in muscle. So now you can maybe see it from below. And you can see that it basically be covered by labia majora. So let's go ahead and look at this where we open it up and we look at the vulva, the portions of the vulva here. And now you can see that this is going to be the small and that's the large. So labia minora, labia majora. The roof of all that is going to be called the vestibule. On the anterior portion of the labia minora, that's where the clitoris is found. And as you follow this system up, this is going to be the external vaginal orifice that goes up into the vaginal canal. It's filled with folds, individual ruga, plural rugae, up into the fork of the vaginal canal called the fornix, posterior, anterior, lateral on either side, through the external os into the cervical canal, to the internal os, into the body of the uterus. The fundus of the uterus would be up here. The three layers, epimysium, I'm saying metrium. I might have said that wrong earlier and I apologize. Holy moly, I'm not going to go back and redo the video because that ain't my style. If you're my student, you know that. But I want to make that correction if I did make that mistake. This is epimysium, endometrium, and myometrium. Even professors can make mistakes. Metrium, metria, endometriitis, right? This is uterus. I'm pretty sure I said it wrong. Oy, 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 Dr. H. Duh. So I'm glad we went back through this. Okay, epimetrium and myometrium and endometrium would be that light layer that you see right there. If you kept following that now, you're going to see the uterus is going to have this tube that goes into it. So that's the fallopian tube. The fallopian tube goes out to the ampulla of the fallopian tube. The ampulla of the fallopian tube goes out to the fingers. You can see it a lot better on this model. Those are the fimbria, fimbriae, plural, which now covers the ovary. Let's look at it from that angle. And you can see those fimbriae that covers the ovary down below. Alright, hopefully you guys can find this useful. Even though I made a mistake, you'll forgive me, I promise. Mistakes are how we learn. Alright, humankind, be both. Best of luck studying. I do recommend learning this as a flowchart. I know you're not looking at my face right now, but learn this material as a flowchart either direction. Either the production of oocytes in the ovary, work it all the way out to the vulva, or you can actually refer to the flowchart as insemination. So where does the insemination occur? Where does semen actually start? And move your way from there to the fertilization of the oocyte in the ampulla of the fallopian tube. There's a bunch of different ways that you can make the flowcharts that will help you with studying the material, both the anatomy and the physiology. Alright, I'm done. Best of luck. Peace.